Hello, my name is Ben,
And my name's Josh.
and welcome back to FPL Graduates, and welcome back to another video where today we're going to be going into the Game Week 36 transfer targets. Not many game weeks left to go. Last game week had a lot of injuries, so there's going to be a few players that you're going to need to replace ahead of that double game week in 37. Let's get straight into it.
Okay, so as Ben mentions, it is only 3 game weeks left of the season, so we've got to really make the most of these transfers going into the last couple of weeks. There is one double game week left next week in game week 37, so a lot of these targets will probably be doubling in that game week. So starting off with the goalkeepers and defenders, we've got Ortega up first. Obviously, Edison came off at half time for Man City at the weekend against Nottingham Forest. Saw leaving the City ground in a sling, and also Guardiola said it doesn't look good. So there is potential to have a double game week Manchester City goalkeeper for only 3.7 million. Obviously, at the time we're recording this on Monday. We haven't had like an extra update on that, and probably won't until Friday's press conference. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, could be a fantastic option, especially for those who were on their wild card who only opted for double Manchester City. However, the only reason you probably wouldn't go for them if you've already tripled up on Manchester City, for example, a lot of managers would already have a Man City defender. Or if you're really chasing upside, some managers have gone for that triple up of Foden, De Bruyne, and Haaland, so you maybe wouldn't be able to get to him. But for the value that he brings, if you've only got two City players right now, serious considerations got to go into bringing Ortega in, especially potentially if you already own Edison.
Yeah, and then going up next is another cheap defender targeting into your teams. I see the likes of Van Heck, Gusto, Connor Bradley, all these players that a lot of managers owned in the last couple of weeks have all got injured all at the same time. So having like a like for like replacement in terms of budget is a good thing, and that's where Harry Maguire comes in. He's only 4.2 million in FPL at the time of recording. Decent goal threat with him. I think I'd look at that more so rather than the United defence. Obviously, United defensively haven't been too great. I would say, obviously, against Sheffield United and Burnley, they have improved, which you'd expect, facing low calibre opposition like that. But I think, yeah, from set pieces, he's shown his value. Obviously, he scored against Sheffield United only last week. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a Man United defender, a lot of managers are going to go for at least one. And I think in terms of the attacking data, his is probably the best out of all of them. So I definitely look at considering him, especially for the double game week. Again, similar to Ortega and Manchester City, if you don't have a Man United defender, I probably would consider investing in one. I wouldn't expect too many clean sheets for the next few game weeks because United's defence hasn't been great throughout. But Maguire's always got that threat from set pieces, and we've seen him start accumulating quite a few points over particularly the last few game weeks. So I'd definitely look at Maguire's definitely in my considerations as well.
Yeah, and then another cheap option that you could potentially choose from, he's currently 4 million, is Valentin Barco. He's Brighton's left wing back. If you haven't seen him, he's a football manager wonder kid, basically. So he's a good one to have in your teams. Obviously, 4 million, playing left wing back in this Brighton setup. I think he's going to be pretty nailed for these last few weeks in the team. Obviously, Estupiñán's been ruled out for the rest of the season. There's just a severe amount of injuries, especially down that left-hand side for Brighton at the moment. So, yeah, he's a nice option. Obviously, alternatively, if you're really wanting to play it safe in terms of minutes, you could go to Lewis Dunk if your budget allows you to. But what's your thoughts on that Brighton defence, and maybe in particular Barco, man?
Yeah, I think it's a decent option to go for, particularly if you've got all defences already covered. I think this is an option where if you've sort of the last possible option for a team because Brighton's defence has been decimated by injuries. The whole team really has been decimated by injuries, so they're not going to be at its full strength. We saw them against Bournemouth; they didn't play too well either. In terms of their form, they only scored like one goal in the month of April. So it's one of those ones where they're not doing too great, but if you've got all other bases covered for double game week 37, you probably are looking at one Brighton defender to go into this double game week. And I think either one of those will lend itself very nicely, dependent on your team structure as well and how much budget you've got left. So, yeah, I do think it's a decent option as one that you're looking at for that last double game week defender. You're only going to start them for one game week. So you've got to just assess the minutes this game week and then make that decision ready for game week 37.
Yeah, and then someone else who's been getting a lot of minutes recently is Josko Vardio. I know you brought him in on your wildcard, Ben. A huge 15-pointer against Forest at the weekend. He's just showing really good attack and threat. I've seen a lot of people say that he's almost picking up the Gundogan role in terms of like crashing the box in that City attack. So I'll leave it to you, Ben, in terms of discussing him.
Yeah, I mean, he could have had a brace in game week 35, which is absolutely ridiculous. Again, could have had a similar sort of score to Ben White. The previous game week, who also brought him for the first time this season. So, yeah, I do think he's a really decent option. I think we're at the point in the season now where City are just going to grind out 1 and 2-0 wins, which automatically, without even getting any attacking returns, means Guardiola is going to be pushing into the bonus every single time. Yeah, he's a fantastic option. I do think there's really good value in that Manchester City defence. Like I said before, a lot of managers are going to be tempted by that triple up in attack. But I think having the bases covered and having at least one City defender can give you really good rank games. We've seen with Arsenal, having one doesn't give you the rank games. Having one City defender really does. They're not that high owned, considering we're right at the end of the season as well, the business end of the season, where Manchester City traditionally do really well. So I think Vardio is a fantastic option for you to go for.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the Arsenal defence, Ben White is last on our list, and this is almost like a double up on top of like a Gabriel or maybe a Saliba if you already own them. Obviously, Arsenal do not double in game week 37. Is obviously to be of note. They do face Manchester United away, which is obviously their hardest fixture remaining on the fixture list so far. But if you look outside of it, they do face Bournemouth and Everton in 36 and 38. And if you think that the title race will go down to the wire, then you'd probably like to think that Ben White starts all three of those games. So, yeah, for me, I think he's a really nice asset. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
I also agree. I think he starts all three games as well, and he has really good attacking threat. I would 100% get him in if I still had the free hit chip left as my one last chip to use in 37, because it's just the perfect ready-made fixtures for Arsenal in 36 and 38. Not too much to complain about there. So you really could sort of try and gain an edge on everyone else by bringing Ben White in. I'd 100% consider him on the double up. I think if you're looking at bringing in one Arsenal defender and only having one, it's pointless looking at him right now. But for a double up, I'd definitely consider it. You just got to bear that in mind. If you are bench boosting in game 37, you're going to be tempted to bring him out and then want to bring him straight back in. Okay, so moving on into the midfield, and we've been talking about Manchester City a lot, and that is because they're in great form. Kevin De Bruyne is one of those. He's hauled in his last 2 game weeks. He's looking fantastic. He's looking nailed. Manchester City obviously not in the Champions League as well, so his minutes are so secure, or as secure as they've ever been under Pep Guardiola. And with him injury free, he's looking fantastic. Josh, you've already got him in, so I'm going to let you speak a little bit more about him.
Yeah, I brought him in last week for that Mo Salah replacement, even before Salah was announced that he was benched, so a bit lucky on that regard. But yeah, 2 assists obviously in game week 35. I think he's got massive haul potential at the minute, especially with the likes of Haaland. Obviously, we didn't see Foden due to illness in game week 35. Those guys maybe in minutes not as secure at the moment, coming back from injuries and stuff like that. So he's their main man going forwards. And when I saw the lineup against Nottingham Forest at the weekend, I thought he would haul just because he'd be that main man in that team. So yeah, really nice option. And as Ben mentions, if you're really chasing rank, having that triple up on City attack is just really nice. I know a lot of managers benched Erling Haaland at the weekend, so there's definite gains to be made in these City assets. For De Bruyne as well, at my rank, he was only 6% owned. A lot of managers obviously going with Gordon, Bruno Fernandes, a lot higher owned. For me, Kevin De Bruyne is probably a better asset than those two, and at a much less ownership, which is great. And obviously money, he is okay, he's 10 million, but we've all got the budget at this sort of stage of the season if we're selling Salah and not having Salah and Haaland in our drafts.
Okay, next up is a guy that is producing numbers that are currently similar to Kevin De Bruyne himself. It's Bruno Fernandes. He clocked up an incredible amount of big chance created. I think it was 3 or 4 in the last game week. He got bonus points off the back of that as well, which goes to show that he is playing fantastically. Again, got haul potential. It's Bruno Fernandes. Josh, is he close to a must own considering the price tag?
I think he's close. The thing that puts me off the most is that he's creating these big chances as he has done for the last few seasons, but they're for poor attackers. I think Anthony missed 3 big chances before he got his goal at the weekend, and that just sort of shows you the sort of the data. With De Bruyne, he doesn't need to create four big chances in order to haul. He only needs to create one, because that's how clinical City are. So that would be my only sort of red flag in terms of Bruno Fernandes. Obviously, he does have the penalties. United's attack isn't necessarily the greatest, as I mentioned, with the likes of Antony. Obviously, no Rashford at the minute. I think that does hamper him a little bit in terms of getting those returns. But United do have some decent fixtures remaining, and I think if you're going for any United player, I think he's got to top the list.
Hey, so next up we've got Anthony Gordon, who is off the back of a 10-point haul against Sheffield United. They have some decent fixtures coming up. However, they do have 3 away games in their last 4, and we know that Newcastle and Anthony Gordon in particular isn't too great away from home compared to when he is at home. I've already got him in. Josh, I'll be interested to hear your thoughts about him. Burnley away is a decent fixture. Brentford away is a decent fixture. And then followed by a double game week there in 37 of Brighton and Manchester United away. So all in all, the fixtures aren't too bad at all for Gordon.
Yeah, no, the fixtures are there, but as you mentioned, his away form is just horrendous compared to his home form. Only 3 attacking returns all season away from home. He's only blanked once at home this season. So he just goes to show how good he is, and probably how better Newcastle are at home as well. So for me, that probably puts him off trying to squeeze him in that midfield. Now I've missed that Sheffield United fixture, just because I think you're just going to play the odds in that sort of scenario. Obviously, he's really highly owned as well, so if you sort of want to go and chase rank, probably going without him's a good idea. If you've got Isak as well, I think Isak's definitely the better pick on being on penalties and stuff like that. So for me, I'd be going without him, but he is a fantastic option, and it would not shock me if he does return in these away games, just because of how good he's been this season.
Yeah, there's every possibility that he could indeed return. One option that is an enabler that you could potentially look at, although his form hasn't been too great, and Brighton's form hasn't been too great at all. Pascal Gross is an interesting option that you could go for. I'm not too sold on this move, 6.1 million, but it is a high risk and a relatively high reward player. If Brighton can get going in these last sort of 4 games of the season, their fixtures are not bad. I mean, Newcastle away, Chelsea at home, followed by Man United at home. That's 3 relatively bad defences in the grand scheme of things. Can Brighton turn that form around, and can Pascal Gross sort of get involved using his sort of set pieces, his potential penalties if Pedro is out, to produce a haul or 2 over the next couple of game weeks?
Yeah, I think that's the main thing with him. You sort of relying on set pieces or even penalties, as you mentioned, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, Brighton haven't been too great going forward. Only 1 goal scored in the whole of last month, which was an own goal at that. So no, nothing too crazy to shout about. But if you're wanting differential, if you're wanting a player who's been a proven FPL asset over the years, I think Pascal Gross is a nice differential.
And moving on to a team who can't stop scoring goals, Bukayo Saka and Kai Havertz seem to be in fine form now, particularly Kai Havertz with the numbers that he is producing. Both players in great form and can prove that they can, score and assist against the toughest of defences. No double game weeks, but I do think there is serious value there to be had with the Arsenal assets and some serious gains to be made, particularly with Kai Havertz.
Yeah, they've definitely become differential. Well, Kai Havertz was already differential, but Bukayo Saka has become a major differential in this sort of last week, since a lot of wildcard has transferred him out. He's only 30% owned in the top 10k, which is sort of unheard of for Saka this season. He's usually been around the 80 to 90% mark, which is incredible to say. Obviously, he come back with a bang against Spurs as well. We've sort of seen a lack of goal threat from Saka over the recent weeks, but he showed it really, really well in that game. And I think if you're looking again for differential sort of players, obviously, yeah, they don't double in 37 and they do face United, but they're going to need to win that game at Old Trafford. So I'd expect there to be goals in that game. For me, I think they're really nice. And if you had to bench boost Saka or Havertz, I still think that would be a fantastic bench boost. Okay, then we're going to move on to the forwards, and that, to be honest, there aren't that many forwards that you should be targeting that you don't already or should have. So we'll go through this list pretty quickly. Erling Haaland's up first. If you don't have him already, you definitely need to get him. He's been in fine form. He's coming back from that injury, scoring off the bench. He just looks like he's ready just to wrap the season up, and he took his finish really, really well. What's your thoughts on him, Ben? He's got to be in your team, right?
Yeah, he's got to be. I feel like Pep's been a little bit careful with bringing him back in at the right time, and he's brought him back when he looks his best and he looks fit again. So I think he's going to absolutely bang in goals for fun over the next couple of game weeks. And there's genuine sort of contender to just perma captain him now for the rest of the season. I do think as well, if you haven't used the triple captainship, there's a potential there to use that again in 37, because I think City are just going to start, again, 1 and 2 nils. And if Haaland picks up a goal or 2 goals in that, it's 3 bonus points easily as well. So I do think he's the best captaincy option this week, next week, and potentially also the week after against West Ham. That's also a fantastic fixture to have to round off the season. And if Arsenal do take it all the way, Haaland, I think, is going to start all of those games going into Game Week 38.
Yeah, another player who's a must own at the moment as well is Alexander Isak. 80% owned in the top 10k at the moment. He's literally was 13% owned only a couple of weeks ago, so it goes to show how much of a bandwagon he's become. On penalties for Newcastle, just looks incredible for Newcastle at the moment. Obviously in the fight for the Golden Boot as well, so I'd expect him to start all 3 of the remaining games despite Callum Wilson coming back. Obviously we saw at the weekend that Wilson and Barnes came on as well as Isak and Gordon being on the pitch, so Eddie Howe is definitely happy enough to do that and field both of them at the same time. Do you think there's a risk there with his minutes, Ben?
I think I don't think there's a risk of him not starting. I think he starts every single game. He's going for that golden boot. I think there's a risk, yes, of him being subbed between 70 and 75 minutes each game, but there's always that risk with any striker that you bring in on FPL. They're always prone to a little bit of rotation towards the end of the games, especially if they've wrapped up the win. So you're hoping, and to be honest, if Newcastle were in any losing position, they're not going to bring off Isak. He's been so key for them this season. Like we said, going for the golden boot, he's their main threat when it comes to scoring goals. And away from home, they're going to need that now going into the final stretch of the season, especially with where they are in the league, pushing potentially for Europe as well. So I definitely have Isak as an essential player going into this game week.
Yeah, and then next on the list is Nico Jackson. I thought he looked really dangerous against Aston Villa. Probably quite unlucky to not come away with a return in that game. We're recording this before the Spurs' second game of that double game week 35, so be interested to see if he does return. What's your thoughts on it, Ben? Because I feel like against Arsenal and against Villa, he's getting into the right places, but it's similar to like that Nunes where he's not really taking them, and the ones that he does take, he tends to be offside.
Yeah, we just need to see him a little bit more clinical, which is what we say about Darwin, is what we said about so many FPL strikers before. If he does get clinical, he's getting enough chances, the goals will come. And this is maybe us being sort of the optimist in FPL fans and in FPL terms, but West Ham's defence is so bad that I think he'll take 1 or 2 of these chances going into next game week. The double coming up is fantastic as well. Forest and is it Brighton that they play?
Yeah.
2 decent fixtures as well. So I have no complaints about bringing in Jackson. I think he's probably top 3 in terms of any striker that you're looking to bring in this week.
Yeah, and then finally on our list is a budget option if you're not sort of stretching for that budget. As we mentioned, Brighton not the best going forwards at the moment. I think that's just, like we said, due to their injuries, they've just not got the full 11 that they would wish to have at the moment. So it is João Pedro. As we mentioned before, he is on penalties for Brighton, so massive plus when he does play. And if they are to get a sort of chance of out of nowhere, I think that's a massive plus with him. I'd ideally only bring him in if you're like bench boosting in 37 and sort of just need to save the cash, maybe, if you're going for like a premium midfield and defence. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, I think the only reason you'd bring him in is if there's lack of funds going into this game week, if you're sort of holding on to potentially Salah or someone like that. So yeah, I do think he's an option. I think Brighton's form, like we said with Pascal Gross, it's the same. You're reliant very heavily on penalties for João Pedro because the chance is not really being created there for him in open play. So yeah, if you are really tight on budget, then by all means go for him for the bench boost in 37. But again, you're only going to be playing him in 37 for this.
Okay, so that wraps up our Game Week 36 transfer targets. Not many weeks left to capitalise on these free transfers, so make sure you're choosing the right players for your teams. If you've got any dilemmas, make sure to comment them down below.
And as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the FPL Graduates YouTube channel. I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
And we'll see you guys
later. Have a good game week, everyone.
You may rise, but you'll never make me wanna stick around you.